with limited time. It always happens. You always have the best intentions of trying to cover as much as you can in a course. So with tonight left and Thursday left, I want to pick your brains
So we're
on.
not having class on Thursday? Is that what you just said?
Nope, I said we were with just Thursday left after this Tuesday. So we have Tuesday and then Thursday, and then that's pretty much it for classes, regularly scheduled classes. So
That's what
with
I
just
originally thought it was.
with these two classes left, we have to come up with a little bit of a plan. And I don't want to take too long with our plan here because everything takes time. But we need to come up with a short term, medium term, and long term study plan, at least for our classes. And then you can take this and turn it into your study plan a little bit too, because I think this is to help you. And I would recommend taking notes here for yourself in terms of developing your study plan. I think when you get to the end of the course, a couple things start to happen. The things that you took from the time together, you maybe aren't sure how to incorporate into your regular schedule. And then the things that maybe we're doing on your own, you might try to compensate. So let me just give you an idea, just so what we tried to do in class. So in class, this is all to help you develop a study plan. So I would take some notes for yourself in just a moment, and I'll tell you when to tune in for the note-taking part. But just to help you plan, this is all to help you develop a study plan. That's the goal here. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I feel like we have done some study plan discussion, but I think it's important before this class and before our next class. So in class, we focus on, this is generally, I try to focus on things that I think you get the most bang for your time with, and that is reviewing questions and question types. They are different, and you want to understand, and I would say methodologies, like how you answer a question, right? That's an important thing to know with CompTIA, how you answer a question. Give me a thumbs up if you would agree with that. Like, I just want to make sure you're on the same boat. How you answer a question is really important. It's 20% of the question. So that's why I focus on it, because a lot of people don't have a lot of experience with that. And at the same time, it allows us to cover content, right? So we cover chapter content and we self-assess. I would actually make that the third point. Self-assessments. And when I say self-assessments, quizzes, labs where appropriate, that's a majority of our time. In we do cover other content area reviews. I would say is like another thing we do. We cover other parts that might not be included in a question, just clarification, right, on items here and there as we need it, right? So that's the in-class part. That's what we've been doing in class. Now, for homework, where you should be, and I think a lot of you have been, because I've seen you improve, is you want to retake assessments, do chapter reading, and review content for clarification, more content review, right? Oh, in this domain, that review content. I would also add that in class, I would say we connect the domains to the objectives. So depending on how you've been studying at home, the amount of time you study at home depends greatly on your success in class because you're more prepared for the assessment. So with limited time, we need to come up with a short term, a medium term, and a long term plan per se for how we're going to address in class what we have left and also what we have to do, what you need to do for studying. So this is where I think your notes and your thoughts is going to be important. Now, I'm going to say I'm going to say one thing I think for each area, but then I want to just quickly ask everybody, and I only want to take 5 minutes to do this, is I want people to give me ideas of what they think is important to focus on in each one of these areas. So I'll go first because I know what we've covered and I'm here to give you ideas too. So in the short term, the biggest areas that I think you want to make sure that you've covered is all areas of Core 1. And I would say domains. And what I mean by short term, I would say in the next 1 week. Let's keep that at 1 week. Also say I'm going to give two for short term because I review all, and we're going to do a little bit of this tonight, all potential PBQs and labs for Core 1. I would say, and of course, Core 1 questions. Now, that's a couple big short-term items. Those are on the top of my brain for where we need to be. Medium term, I think you really need to update your self-assessment of knowledge in the domains. And what, that means is some things we've talked about. I don't want to go into it at length right now, but we've talked about what that means is finding out what you know and what you don't know. And then longer term, I'll say medium term is probably 2 to 3 weeks. Long term, I would say is 4 weeks till test date. And I'll say with test date core 1 is feel comfortable with the domain objectives for core 1. And the nice thing about preparing this way for core 1 is that you're going to feel the same for core 2. They're going to be different topics, but the way that you study and prepare is going to pay off for core 2. I would also say begin reviewing with the same strategies core 2, and I'm only saying that because I don't want to leave it off the table. I want you to feel like core 2 is in your purview. You don't have to test for core 2 within 6 weeks, but you don't want to ignore it completely either. And I would probably add, and you always want to be consistent improvement with consistent 5 to 10% improvement on assessments. And what I mean by that is when you're taking assessments, it's more, I'll add a sub bullet, it's more refining knowledge than new knowledge. So hopefully most of you see where I'm going with this. So there's the short term, what we want to try to do now. Then there's what you want to try to do in the next 2 weeks. And then there's the long term. So just to get that out from underneath us, that should help you refine your study plan. Now I need some feedback from all of you. And you can put it in the chat. You don't have to say it a lot if you don't. What is one thing that you plan on doing in the short term, let's say, different than what I said, you feel like you would need to do in the next week to 2 weeks to definitely feel like you're improving with everything? What's something you're going to try to do? Everyone should write something in the chat. Everyone should think about this and write something in the chat. How are you going to study? And don't be too broad. Have a specific strategy. Everyone should come up with a short-term strategy. What is it going to be? And it could be, but let's try to be as specific as possible. What is the short-term strategy? If this was the last 5 minutes I was talking to you, what is the first strategy you would say you need to take going into short term? Next things, your next steps. Has anyone written in anything in the chat yet, or should I refresh? Oh, there it is. I just want to make sure my chat's working. Perfect score on core 1. All right. Focus on PBQs and take more time in the notebook. So I'm gonna try to help people with their ideas here. So I'm gonna be a little critical but fair. I want you all to I'm gonna try to refine your ideas a little bit because I think these are good ideas. I just don't want you to be too ambitious, and I want you to be as specific as possible. And I'm waiting on Nallie's when she's ready. So with Verticons, get a perfect score in core 1. That's a good plan. But remember, you don't have to be a perfectionist. So just remember, if you're getting 1 or 2 wrong and you're in core 1, it's not the end of the world. And sometimes it might be more important to just make sure you understand the objectives sometimes. I just don't want you to drive yourself crazy because I know it can be, oh my God, I didn't get that one question right. And just make sure that the ones that you're getting wrong, you're going back and reviewing and making sure why you understand. And if you're getting something wrong, make sure you know why you're getting it wrong. Don't let it hang out there because it's probably connected to something else. But that's a good short-term strategy. Just I don't want you to drive yourself crazy either. I want you to don't let it hold you back from if you feel like, oh, I should also work on this other thing. feel like you can take little breaks. But that's a good strategy. I would try that. So Camille has a good one. Focus more on PBQs and take more time practice exam. So we're going to talk about PBQs tonight. And what I want to do is I'm going to give you some resources on some PBQs, but I also want to see what we have in the portal for PBQs. And the way I want to address PBQs is I want everybody to just have an idea of what to expect on the Core 1 PBQs and then eventually on the Core 2 PBQs. So that's just a couple areas. So just remember with the PBQs, I will say it's an important topic, but once you've covered the areas and you've done your research and you've done some practice questions related to PBQs, it's also okay to sometimes be like, I've done the most I can. Maybe I'll keep practicing my core one. The PBQs are important and you want to make sure the areas, but there's going to be things in the PBQs that because they're in-depth questions, there's that chance of going down the rabbit hole again. So just be careful. Just try to learn the concepts. And I think with all of this, that's the important thing is know the concepts so that if the question goes one direction versus another direction, you're ready. But the PBQs, great short term. So Naomi wants to do some. Now, Naomi, I would be a little more specific. I would say maybe you want every single time to see an improvement on your Core 1 exam. I would just be careful with using a lot of question generators because the question types are really important. I would recommend, honestly, instead of generating a lot of questions from tools that don't generate them like CompTIA, is I would use the Core 1 and Core 2 practice exams. I would use the videos I've shared with you because the videos that I have with the questions are exactly some of the same styles as CompTIA provides them in. And then I shared a document on the boot camp day, and I believe I included it. It's a review of Core 1 questions, and it's a spreadsheet. Just even looking and reading all the way through the questions is going to help you. The reason why I'm worried about the question generators is that I think question generators are good. I think it's good to know the acronyms. If I were to use a question generating tool, I would use it for knowing the acronyms over anything. But in terms of scenario-based questions, I would avoid them because they may not write the scenarios the same way. But I have an acronym list that created this past week. I could share that. I could put that actually on our doc and give that to us. I made an acronym list myself because I thought that's a good idea. We can have the acronyms and I can add that, but I would use some of the materials you have for questions themselves, just because the question types are so important. And Jackie's thinking about section still, and that's a good one. I would definitely like what you could do too is also just repeat even the smaller assessments. If you're not confident in an area, a very specific area, rewatch the retake the smaller assessments too, just to keep your flexibility. But that's a very good strategy. All those ones that you really feel like you didn't get 100% on, rinse and repeat, try them over again. Like this video, this is lesson one that covers a lot of questions. I can go in and I'll look for, while you're working tonight, I'll try to find another chapter or two. But videos, you want the videos that have some of the stuff from CompTIA because it can be a little tricky. Just be as specific as you can. But remember, if it regenerates a question, it's not going to regenerate it the same way. CompTIA is very specific with how they pose the question.
I have noticed doing it with the Copilot, the notebook, that they looks like they repeat some of the questions, but they really don't. It's that 1 or 2 word difference.
You just want to make sure that the thing with a good CompTIA question, and this is why I express a little conservative. A good CompTIA question is going to be one that you have to think not only about the scenario and whether or not you're addressing the scenario, the best solution for the scenario, or the troubleshooting methodology. So you're going to see questions where it's going to make you think they're asking something very specific in terms of a piece of information, like manual IP or some sort of seemingly important vocabulary term. But it might really just be asking you about what's the right step of the that you would be addressing there. So you want to just make sure you understand the troubleshooting methodology as much as possible as it applies to questions, because you're going to want to you're not going to want to get those questions wrong, because you're going to look back and be like, oh my God, all I had to do was say, oh, it was step 3 or identified the problem. You want to be able to read the question, because CompTIA loads their questions with the troubleshooting methodology. They want you to know their methodology, not on every single question, but they're going to push you. Does this one require the methodology versus just needing to know what exactly they're asking for? So I would lean more towards, if you're going to study something specific, really narrowed down, that's not a scenario, you could do the acronyms and do flashcards at the acronyms just to make sure you have those in your head. You could do different types of things that I think are helpful, is knowing different types of RAM, knowing the power wattage for different power supplies, knowing different types of memory, knowing the adapters, knowing the cords. You're going to get questions that are very specific to different cord types. You're not going to get 100 of those questions, but you're probably going to get 5 or 6. And it really depends on the core 1 breakdown. So Jake, we're just sharing, I was talking a little bit about just short-term study goals for people in terms of planning next steps. So the next thing is medium, definitely. So let me give a sample medium, and then I'll ask everyone for a sample medium. So update self-assessment of knowledge in the domains. So let's say you just locked down, you did your core 1 prep, you looked at your PBQs, you've been doing that for a week, 2 weeks, you're kind of getting sick of it. You updated your assessment of knowledge in the domains, identify objectives. I think at this point, you want to make sure you're at least identifying the objectives. If you're, do people think would be another good medium task? 2 weeks after this class ends, how are you still keeping the studying going? What are you really trying to figure out now? 2 weeks from now. What's the goal 2 weeks from now? You should feel a little more comfortable with your own study plan, right? Hopefully. And that's why I'm walking through this now, because I want you to feel comfortable with your own study plan. So you all came up with an idea for a study plan, a little bit of a first step. What are you going to do differently in 2 weeks? What do you think what do you feel like you should know? Let's see, contract. Yep, you should finish all your assessments. You should have definitely reviewed all your domains, finished assessments. But how are you going to improve? Like, what's something consistent? Because you're going to be a little more sick of studying proficiency in labs. Yep, you're going to feel like you have 2 weeks from now, if you had a lot of self-study, yep, give more time. Yep, these are all good little extras. Saying, yep, exactly. Set aside a very specific amount of time. I think that's 2 weeks from now. That's going to be really important, because you don't want to go into the bubble. All right, I just got finished with this class, because you're going to be motivated for like a week. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to be motivated for like a week, but the 1, 2 or 3 day period over the same week in which you had classes that you forget to study might throw you completely off, and you might not go back to studying for 2 weeks. It could happen. So, yep, go back and refresh and refine, because you're probably going to find, just as we looked at the questions before, that there's probably questions that you aren't sure of. And I would also say that those extra 2 weeks in between are also a good time to just narrow down. You could look at just acronyms. You could get very specific. So you should be improving assessments, I would say consistent performance on assessments. If I would, 2 weeks from now, you should be getting a more consistent performance on assessments, whether that's a 70, and you always get a 70 on that assessment, an 80, and you always get an 80, and you're going from 70 to 80 or 80 to 90, but you're in the passing zone and improving. But the only way you're going to know that, what's the only way you're going to know what to study at that point? Practice, and you also have to review your domains and be like, boy, I suck at networking, and I need to go back and review it, and I need to do it again and again and again, because there's these 4 terms. And at that point, That's when you're also taking notes. You're taking the learning journal notes. You're saying, all right, I just took the core one. What did I do good? What did I do bad? Where do I need to go back? But at the end of the day, you should be getting more consistent performance on these assessments. And I would say 70% plus scores, just FYI. You should be getting 70% plus on your assessments. Whatever assessments you're taking, that could be labs, that could be anything. Aim for the 70%. Because if you're not getting 70%, I'm going to be honest, 70% is good because even if it's 10 questions, it's 7 out of 10. If you can get the 70%, you could improve any assessment score. If you get a 30 or a 40, you really have to go back and do it. So you should try to get that 70% and retake. And you should try to get everything that you're taking, no matter what it is, up to 70%. People are going to have weaker areas than other areas, but you got to get everything to 70 so that you can improve. Because if you're not getting that 70, you're skipping out on something. You're not realizing what you're missing. I would say 70 is that point where, like, if you keep getting a 70, you're not reviewing what you need to review. And then when you get to 80, you need to figure out what you're missing. When you get to 90, you need to figure out what you're missing. And then you're slowly going to improve. But every assessment you take, you should be getting at least a 70 2 to 4 weeks from now because you've practiced it so much, right? You should start to know what you're responding to. That's how you're going to know. Now, how about, what are you doing 3 days before the test? Last weekend before a Core 1 test. Tell me on the last weekend before the Core 1. How are you handling that one? Everyone tell me how they think they're going to handle. We'll call this the final 6 hours. How are you going to handle that? Try to relax. Yep. Definitely want to relax. You could cram. You definitely want to get some good sleep. So you don't want to be studying the night before. It's not worth it, right? Stress, you got to realize at this point too, it is what it is. You know what, you're not going to learn more in 6 hours than you did in the last 3 months, right? So take that pressure off of yourself because it's not fair to you. You're not going to learn all of the labs in 3 hours perfectly. If you tried to, you would just stress about it. You want to get some good sleep, but how are you going to study? How are you going to feel like you're studying yet not driving yourself crazy? What are some simple tactics? You want to study. You don't want to just not do nothing, but what little things? Here's what I would do. Honestly, I would make flashcards of questions from some of my own videos because I know some of those are much closer than the ones you have in this platform. But I would also, don't be afraid to use Core 1 questions from the platform we're on. I would do flashcards and just keep a deck of flashcards, index cards. Go to the pharmacy or Walmart and buy a stack of 100, 200 index cards and just write either an acronym on one side and then the definition on the other, and then a question on one side and the answer on another. And I would just keep 100, 200 flashcards. I wouldn't do the digital ones because what is the benefit of the flashcards? What's the first benefit? Even before you start using them, you have to read it and you have to write it. So I'm a big fan of flashcards. Here's why flashcards are good. I'm going to tell you why flashcards are good. I think they are. You may hate them, but here's why I think they're good. First of all, you need to read and write correct answer. And someone do some Googling for me and tell me what is the percentage more likely you're going to remember something if you write something down? How much more likely are you to remember something after you write it down? Anyone look that up for me? It's got to be Googleable. Is it more than 50% more likely? There's got to be some data. 20%. Vertica, are you Googling? You do that or on Messenger. I don't know. It's probably like at least 30% more likely just by writing it down. So that's the first benefit, right? So you go through your books and you're like, oh, here's a question. First of all, you can target questions you don't know. So that's another benefit. You're not answering questions that you already know the answer to. There we go. So look at that. Google says about 50. And Verticon's got, that's a good one too. So you take this stack of 100, 200 cards, and then you're writing down questions that are hard, that you've had trouble with. You're not writing down the easy ones. Don't spend 2 hours writing down easy questions. You want to write down all the ones you get wrong. Knowledge delivery. Write down the hard questions. All right. The other pro of doing flashcards is, I'm going to say, do the hard ones. The other pro of doing flashcards is you can do acronyms and scenarios. You're not stuck with one type of question. Another, and I think this is one of the biggest benefits of them, they don't require tech. All right. And I say that because at a certain point, you're just going to want to be in a car, on a train, laying in bed, getting ready to go to bed. You could literally, I also think they're time efficient. You don't need to log into a computer. You know what I mean? You just can keep them in your pocket, get a big elastic, and just keep doing flashcards. And you could do a new set of flashcards after each study session, just 5 or 6. You could add 5 or 6 new flashcards after each study session. Memory encoding. So I would create a few after each study session. And you know what? Before you go into the test, you could sit there and you could fidget with your flashcards. You know what I mean? And just go through your flashcards. In your studying, you don't need to be on your phone. You don't need to be on a computer. You pour Coke on them. They're going to work fine. Long version phrase. Yep. Acronyms. Yep. Because you have to read this really long description. And if you have to write it down, you're going to remember it even more. But I would stay focused on the ones that you have trouble with because there's like 1,000 things. So maybe I'll try to make some flashcards for you, but I don't want to make digital ones because I feel like digital ones are good and they're good, but I would seriously just make 200 to 300 paper flashcards and just get a big elastic band and take them everywhere you go for a couple weeks. And then add to them. Don't let them get static. There's a really good language app called Anki, right? I'll tell you about something I learned when I was trying to learn Spanish like a few years ago. So I was on YouTube, and I don't know if anyone knows of this app called Anki. You could actually probably use CompTIA A with it. The whole idea behind this Anki app was that the worst part about it is you had to make your own database, and you would add 30 words a week, and you would see the words, and then you would try to get the word right, the definition, and it would slowly tell you what percentage you got correct. You would each week get 5 new words. So as you were improving, you were also getting worse because you were adding new words. But at the end of the day, you were improving because you were learning more and you were getting better at the words that were already in the stack. So just think about it that way. Add 5 words a week and it will make you simple RAM. Yep. So that would be by the time you get to the testing date, you want to be you. I don't think you want to be. Here's another benefit of flashcards. They're simple. By the time you get to the last weekend before the exam, look at how many links I've given you, how many resources I've given you. Look at the different types of questions that we've looked at. Look at the portals you've logged into. Look at the spreadsheets we have reviewed. Look at all the different strategies. You're never going to be able to make sense out of all of this stuff in those final days in a way that's actually going to be really super productive for you. A couple days before the exam, you need to start simplifying things. You need to start getting down to just what I need to know, how I need to know it, my strengths, my weaknesses, and I know how to practice. You don't want to be logging in or filing a document. Also, at that point, if you get like a 60 or a 70, it's not going to be good for you. You really want to. So let's say you do a digital assessment and you get a 65. Let me go back and reassess what I missed. 4 or 5 questions. You go back, you have to do an assessment on those 4 or 5 questions to know if you're really going to improve them. That's great if you have the time to do that. if you go through, you get one wrong in your flashcard deck, all you need to do is go through the deck again and see if you got right or wrong. Just go through the deck again. We did come up with a date, but when I was talking with, we were thinking you might want to do remote, Jake, because of the drive. So I think that's something that came up with Carla. So
I'm going to speak for a moment on
yes,
that. I think that I might prefer to go in person, even though it's a significant drive, by virtue of the fact that I've heard some horror stories of testing remotely from home.
I just mentioned it to Carla because she reached out, right? Did she reach out yet
I
about the
didn't get a
date?
message from her, no.
All right. She should be sending something because I asked her to send something. So I think I don't want to get into it now because I think it'll be a big distraction to people, but Carla's sending something. So if there's any issues with that, then I would reply back to that.
All right, thank
But
you.
that was one thing we were thinking. Expect something from Carla today, tonight, or tomorrow, very soon. We talked about it this week. So, all right, what I'd like, so I just wanted to have that conversation with people because I think from here you really need to start thinking about how you're going to study and other things. The other thing I want to point out to people is on here, I put this core 1 and 2 PBQ topics to focus on. This is really to help you narrow down a little bit of the PBQ thought. So you're going to have performance-based questions on the exam. All right. What I would like to do tonight is I'd like to go over this for 10 minutes, talk a little bit about this, maybe ask some questions of people. Oh, sorry, I'm not sharing it. Tonight, what I'd like to do is go over this document a little bit that I linked off of our sheet, talk about performance-based questions, talk about the areas that performance-based questions are focused on. Just introduce the whole idea to people because it's kind of a deep idea, but I need to give you ways to prepare for it without worrying you. So this is all designed to help reduce anxiety. That's what I'm trying to do here. But I also feel like it's important to introduce the topic, get into it, then push you back into another assessment and then bring you back out. So with Core 1, this is a sheet that has Core 1 and Core 2 performance-based question topics to focus on. So I broke it out in terms of topic areas. Now, this is not the question types. These are just the areas that these questions attempt to address. At the end of class tonight, I'm going to go over a little bit of question strategies with these, but I don't want to hit you with both at the same time. I just want to introduce it, let you work for an hour, then bring you back and then go back into this because I do think you have to start looking into this. I just don't want to spend 2 hours on this because I think it will overwhelm you a little bit and you might not be as efficient in your final 2 classes, if that makes sense. So first of all, with Core 1 PBQs, they're performance-based questions. So they're going to have a scenario, is going to be a scenario you're going to read through. All right. When you read through that scenario, it's going to lay the land on the question. You're then going to be given an interface where you're going to have to select or click off or choose. And it's all going to be based on trying to properly address the scenario. So you need to be ready to analyze. And that's going to take knowing these topics enough so that if you were in the scenario, you could provide the right solution. So with the first thing, we have hardware installation, configuration, and troubleshooting. You are going to need to know the steps to install RAM. You're going to want to know how to install RAM. You're going to want to know where the CPU is located. You're going to want to know the difference between a hard drive, an SSD drive, and the form factors, right? Remember when we were talking about form factors? And we have those are super important. Form factors, presentations, all of that. So you're going to want to review all of that about computer hardware, installation of hardware components, connectors. Then you're going to want to know how PCs are built different. What's different between a gaming PC? Usually it's the processor. Graphic design could be the processor and storage, or a home office computer. What are the differences in maybe form factor, CPU, hard drive, and storage, full storage and RAM? And you're going to want to be able to, if someone asks you what type of PC is good for gaming, understand why. And that's usually because of the graphics processor. But then maybe for a home office, you don't need such a powerful computer. But for a graphic design computer, you might need a mix of, hey, we want the processing power in the video, but maybe we want to store a lot of files as well. So maybe we need more storage space. Then you're going to want to troubleshoot hardware issues. Remember how we talked a little bit about the post errors? What types of errors happen on post? In your reading and content, not necessarily all the questions we've addressed, there are different beeps and codes and post errors. What causes a power failure at boot? We've talked about overheating with laptops. We've talked about boot issues. So just introducing that whole idea, those are a lot of moving parts. You're going to have a question in a Core 1 PBQ that's going to ask you and create a scenario around solving one of those issues. Or it might be an interactive where you have to show how you install RAM and where the CPU is located and how to use remember the electrostatic discharge wrist strap? Why is that important to use? All of that stuff is included in that topic. So I'm just going to try to give you the big picture and also talk about the details a little bit as I know we've addressed them in our coursework because we've addressed them. It's just I want you to notice that some of these questions, if you notice, aren't questions that we've had specific questions about. Do you know what I mean? And the reason why is because a lot of the questions back to the scenario-based questions on the exam that are the ones we've been practicing aren't necessarily the same type of question as the PBQs. They're different. All right, then we have mobile devices. We have had a couple scenario-based questions on mobile devices. Now, the thing with mobile devices is you're probably going to have a question around mobile devices in a corporate environment where what's the proper configuration for this mobile device, being that it's going to be used this way or that way. Batteries, the connectivity of the device, synchronizing the data on devices. What's a best practice? So the challenging part for PBQs for some people who may be newer to IT stuff is items that kind of common knowledge if you've been working with tech a little bit. So you want to just make sure you review mobile devices in terms of what's the best practice for this particular type of device in this scenario and how we're using the data versus the memory versus the connectivity versus, you know what I mean? So there's going to be some layers to it. Now with networking, I can pretty much guarantee you that you are gonna have a question on a configuration of a type of network. All right. The first network that you're gonna want to make sure, and I'm not just saying stuff here, you're gonna want to make sure you understand how to set up and troubleshoot a small office, home office network. That's a very common PBQ. Finding out how to do that is in your course materials. It's going to be about configuring the router, it's going to be about setting up connecting devices, switches, access points, and modems. And we may be able to go into that a little bit on Thursday, but I just want you to know that is, I would definitely ones to focus on. So if I ones to start with, just to give you a priority list, I'm not guaranteeing anything because I can't guarantee which PBQs are on here, but I would definitely, to give you a start, I would definitely start with identifying, installing the configuration. I would focus also on just the setting up, configuring, and troubleshooting, and then the managing mobile. And then when it gets to networking, definitely you need to review the small office, home office, and the type of gateways for IPv6 addresses and wireless security. So a lot of those acronyms, WAN networks, knowing the difference between the types of networks. Those are perfect index cards, right? And that's another reason why index card strategy is good, because say you're studying that, you need to know how to set up a small home office network. Well, what is part of that once you get into your reading? Is there something that you're not remembering? Make a card for it. Make sure you understand it. All right. So if you notice, these are very hands-on type topics for performance-based questions. This is another one that you're definitely going to want to know. RAID and storage configurations. Now, we've been talking about RAID from day one in this course. It's possible to, RAID is definitely one where you need to understand the basics of the configuration of a RAID. When redundancy is happening, when it's not happening, and what are the basic setups. And there are a couple questions that you can use to understand the basic configuration of RAID. That's going to get you a couple points on the RAID PBQ. Is it going to give you 100? Probably not. All right. But you need to know how to extend the thinking of how a basic RAID is set up so that you can do better on that one. Because it's going to push your knowledge. If we're doing this way, what happens if we're going to do it this way? They're going to ask you a question on that. Virtualization and cloud computing. Definitely need to know these three different types of cloud computing environments: software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. Those are the cloud computing models: infrastructure, platform, and software as a service. Basically, these are those items living on the cloud and how they help business, how they help individuals. Google Photos is software as a service. Amazon Cloud Computing is platform as a service. Infrastructure as a service is like Microsoft Azure, and platforms and infrastructure have some overlapping parts, but that's what they are. So virtual machines, why would you even use a virtual machine? What's a virtual machine for? And I know we've talked about that. And the benefits of cloud storage and remote access. We've talked about the benefits of remote access, such as VPNs, virtual private networks, and why are they beneficial? Then we have diagnosing, resolving hardware and network issues. What are the issues? What are the types of issues? What are connectivity type problems? Printer and peripheral issues. Definitely review the slide deck that I have on printers issues. What are common printer issues? How do they happen? What are the parts of the printer that can go wrong? How do you connect a printer? All right. Network issues in printers, troubleshooting slow internet connections. Why does Wi-Fi drop out? Why aren't things connecting? How do you reset something if it doesn't connect? So definitely selecting compatible parts, RAID, troubleshooting multiple devices, and correcting network configuration. Those are definitely topics. Focus on the hands-on. Focus on, remember back to when you pulled apart the computer and you looked at the parts. Focus on when you saw how things were connected. Take that memory and think about, this is the RAM, this is the hard drive. Even look at your own computer and start to put those pieces together. Now, I put some resources here if you want them. I'm not going to hit on Core 2 yet. I just don't think you're really super ready for it. If you want to look at it, it's definitely here for now, but I would study it the same way. It's about reviewing the big themes here and figuring out what's wrong and understanding that there's going to be a scenario-based question that you're going to need to address related to the Core 1 PBQs. All right, that's your introduction to PBQ topics. All right, don't freak out about those until you're ready to freak out about them. Treat them little projects. I need to know how to set up a home network. I need to know what are some common issues when a computer posts. I need to know the parts of the computer. I should know the common connectors to the computer. I should know the common print issues. I should know what infrastructure as a service is. I should know what software as a service is. I should know what platform as a service. See how it all comes down to, you just need to figure out and know what those terms are, and they're all in the content. So you're going to learn what those terms are if you don't already know them, which you should know 90% of those, and then go back, and then we'll probably try to do some scenarios to help you break those out next. But I just needed you to know that those are the main themes, all right, in Core 1 PBQs. I might make some digital flashcards for you folks. There's some cool tools. Maybe I'll look into that. I just feel like flashcards are good because the repetition and the speed of the repetition that you can do with a lot of this stuff is good. And also flashcards keep you focused on the topic. It doesn't give you oh, here's your three options, and you kind of get in your head about it. It's either you know it or you don't. And I would say that's another benefit of flashcards is you either know it or you don't with your responses. There's no, oh, I was confused by the third option. If you don't know it, you don't get confused. You just don't know it. And then if I don't know it, another thing you can do with flashcards is add the domain to the answer. So when you make the card, you make your question, and then on the other side, you have the answer, but then you also have an indicator of the domain. And what you can do is, I'll give you another strategy if you're using the flashcards, is go through all of them, put each one you get wrong to the side and repeat. I guarantee you, if you do this, you're going to learn. If you do that strategy right there, you're going to learn. Forcing yourself to learn. So definitely think flashcards are good. If you wanted to make digital flashcards, I would, you could make like a photo gallery of your regular flashcards. Just put them in order. Just make sure you have them in the correct order. So I'm hoping you feel more comfortable hopping in and drill and killing an hour worth of questions because that's really what you need to keep improving your score. Now, what makes you okay? So I'm seeing in the comments, I did better, I did horrible, or whatever. How are you measuring what? Give each person, if each person could give me two ways that they measure how well they did. Is it just the number of correct, right, or wrong? Because that's not really a true measure. Getting a 60 out of an 80 isn't a true measure if it's in an area. It could be good for you if it's an area you don't really know well. So what makes you say you did well versus it's not as simple, percentage mostly, but percentage of what? You may have just gotten more questions that you were unfamiliar with this time around. How are you analyzing your results? You need to know how to analyze your results. I'm just suggesting that you need to know that before you take too much stock in any one score. Because the thing you need to focus on, more importantly, the most important part of any score that you get after taking any of these assessments, it's not really how many you got right or wrong. It's how the ones you got wrong, how wrong were you? To be honest with you, because let's say you had a 10 question assessment. Well, with a 10 question assessment, let's say you got four wrong. That's enough. That's a 60%, right? In most ways, you would say, oh, I got 60%. That's not very good. Well, here's what you really need to do. Say you got a 60. Oh, six of those questions might have been in your strongest area. You could have done worse than a 60. What you have to be careful of is looking at the one number, especially when practicing. So at the end of the day, let's realize this. You're looking to get the best score possible, of course, right? You want a high score. You have to realize that the studying is just preparation for getting the best score possible. So if you're Tom Brady, or let's say you're a football player and your job is to throw touchdown passes and your job is to throw them 100 yards. Well, if you're asked to throw the ball 100 yards, it's almost impossible. Maybe you can throw it 50 yards, maybe you can throw it 60 yards, maybe you can throw it even 70 yards, but you might not be able to actually even achieve the task sometimes based on the challenge you're giving yourself. So but the challenge you're giving yourself is only relevant to how much you've prepared. So what you need to do is that every single time you get a score, you need to figure out, tell me your weakest domain in the questions you answered. Tell me what was the weakest domain in the questions you answered. And the ones that you got wrong, how quickly can you identify which domain? And I don't want to hear this one and that one. I want to hear the weakest domain. So can you go through the responses and the ones you got incorrect? Because I'm going to guess that you probably answered maybe 30 questions, maybe 35 questions. So you probably didn't do an entire core one. So, but of the ones you answered and you got wrong, which was your weakest domain? What was your weakest area? I want you to be able to do that You should be able to do that after every single assessment. And the same thing with flashcards. If you're doing a group of flashcards, that's why I think putting the domain on the flashcards is another good idea, because say you go through 100 flashcards, right? And you pull out the ones that you get wrong, and you put the domain on the flashcards in small letters in the corner. Well, when you flip through your cards and you see you're getting wrong, I'm only going to practice these ones I'm getting wrong, then you're going to know the domain because it's going to say it on the back of each card. So I think it's key to make sure that when you're getting questions wrong, you know the domain, because you really need to know the area that you need to target. Now, if it's networking, which is common, it's very common to be networking. It's some of the acronyms related to networking. And I'm sure each one of you right there who's written networking or knows, you could even go the next level and say, in networking, it's knowledge of networks, or it's setting up a certain type of network. You just have to be ready to know what that next thing is, right? And that's where you're going to improve your score faster. You got to realize, as we've been going through questions, there you go, IP4 versus IPv6. She can go back and she can review that. That's where taking notes after doing an assessment is really important, because you're going to look back on each assessment that you took, and even these small little chats here, you should remember which ones you're getting wrong. And those are the ones that you need to go back and do again. Those are the ones that you need to figure out the definitions for. Those are the ones that you need to make a note card for. So I'll try to make some note cards. I don't want to make digital note cards. I do, but I don't. I might make some in Canva. It's kind of easier to make a video in Canva than it is the actual digital note cards. So we'll see what we can do. But if I make them in Canva, they're okay in Canva. They're also good in a note card generator, but they're best in just hands-on note cards. So, all right, let's just review one more time before we go. I'm going to ask you now as I'm looking. So just to recap, because I feel like a little bit of repetition is going to help here. You want to start thinking about how you're going to study short term. So that begins now. Short term begins now. Short terms, all right, I need to practice my core one. I need to be on my domains. I need to start looking at the PBQs. I need to start looking at the concepts in the PBQs. I need to start breaking down my questions. I need to create flashcards for questions I get wrong to start. I would highly recommend that for questions I get wrong. If you don't know what to start with the ones you get wrong. And I would buy 500 cards. They're cheap. They're not expensive. They're at Walmart or any store. Buy like 500 cards. Create flashcards. Put the domains on the back with the answer. Quiz yourself. I guarantee you. So hold on one second. Quiz yourself and put aside the ones you get wrong. Repeat those cards. Who wants to try that? Anyone want to try to volunteer for that? Anyone want to try? I'm going to tell you, it's going to work. It's going to improve your knowledge instantly. Jake, do the ones, you're a pretty good student. Do the ones, anyone else do it too. I challenge you, do 100, do 50, even if it's doing 25, 30 flashcards in your highest need area. Do the quote, include the domain. I guarantee you, after 3 or 4 rounds of just doing the cards, you're going to remember the stuff. And if you put it in the form of a question, you're definitely going to get the questions. And the nice thing is, it's also going to become a note. You know what I mean? Sometimes you don't know when to take notes in a class like this. I'm telling you, and maybe I'll recommend this the next time I classes, go through and make a flashcard every single time. Because once you make that card, you have it. And you're either going to remember it or you need to study it again. So I'd love it if someone else wanted to also try it, because it will help you. If you want to improve, it's going to help you improve. It's a no-brainer to help you improve. It's going to work just because of the repetition and the frequency. So highly recommend it. Jake will give us his feedback. Jake wants to do well. I think that's the thing. You want to do well. You want to take action in a way that you can control. And the way you can control it, you just got to put that information in front of you and say, right or wrong, did I get this right or wrong? It's very similar to when we did the questions. You remember what did you like about the questions that you didn't know the options for. What did that do? Remember when we did the questions and you didn't know the options? What did that help you do? What did it make you think when you saw the question and you didn't have an option until I showed you the option? Overall understanding, just like Jake said, it made you think, what are they really asking for? Are they asking for troubleshooting methodology? Are they asking for an acronym? Are they asking for a specific term or a process? The flashcards are going to do the same thing. You're not going to put your options on a flashcard. It's going to test your overall, do I know what this term means? Then you're going to flip the card over and be like, boy, I really do, or I really don't. And then you're going to know the domain and you're going to put it aside in the pile. It's, I know these or I don't know these. So it's going to help you. If you want to improve as fast as possible with just content and questions that are CompTIA based, those flashcards are going to help you. Also, knowing the domains and what they're connected to is going to help you. You also can do scenarios if you want. You're going to have, it's going to be, you could type them out and put them on a flashcard. You're not going to be writing them out, but at least you'll be able to study them the same way as a flashcard. But I would recommend writing as many of them as possible. All right. I'm pushing you towards flashcards if you can do it. Now, what I would like to go over just before we go, I'm going to push you a little bit here too, because that's my job at this point in the class. Push you a little bit more and get you to think. So I want you to identify, each person should chime in the chat in 2 areas that they feel like for each PBQ, they need to study better. So in this very first topic for PBQs, under hardware installation, configuration, and troubleshooting, which 2 of these? All right, actually, why don't we do this? Instead of doing 2, why don't you do, I need to study this one and I feel okay on this one. And I want you to tell me what you think you need to study and what you feel like you might be okay with for core 1, hardware installation. What do you think you are okay on and what do you need to study for a topic? If I was going to give you a question, and maybe I will mess with you a little bit. Naomi's saying on hardware, troubleshooting, I think, networking does definitely. All right, other people. You got to look at it and what you got to do a little bit of self-analysis here, what you feel strong and weak. You got to spit it out a little bit so that you say it to yourself. Boy, I need to know this because I don't know what post errors are. I don't know what NVMe is. I don't know the connectors for expansion cards. I don't know the wattage for power supplies. I don't know the difference between a home office computer and a gaming computer and why. I don't know where RAM is on my computer. I don't know the difference between a hard drive and SSD. I don't know where the CPU is located. I don't know why I would use an electrostatic discharge. Do a little bit of self-reflection there and throw it in the chat. Just like, where do you need to focus? So I'm going to generate a sample. I have a sample generated. Now, these, I would not use these as exact replicas for CompTIA, but I'm going to give you this one. I'm going to put it in as a sample, but this is something for you to look at and then work off of if you need to. And let me make the doc because mine's not working. And I'll share my screen in a minute. So I'm giving you this with the answer key, but this is the type of stuff you need to think about. I'll put this next to us. So here's a scenario with building and troubleshooting a custom workstation. So I have seen the question around a desktop optimizer graphic design, and it failed to boot and displays no video output. And don't you remember when we were at the boot camp talking about the different types of output from the video cables? And also the other night we were talking about the differences in HDMI. So here's like the correct components: CPU, RAM, storage, graphics card. These are going to be all relevant to that graphic design computer. So you want to figure out what would be the best, all right? Then troubleshoot the issue based on symptoms. Powers on but does not post, displays no video output, has a red LED. These are 3 simple troubleshooting areas that you can go over. Choose the 3 most likely causes of the issue from the list before. RAM's not seated, dead CMS battery, faulty power supply, disconnected CPU cable, no thermal paste. We talked about thermal paste at the first boot camp, faulty monitor. We troubleshot that a little bit. Discrete GPU not inserted. I gave you an answer key here. Don't look at that until you're ready. But this is a very simple sample scenario, all right? You're gonna get something like this, except it's probably gonna even be more expanded. So that is that. So let me put this link on the PBQ doc. I'm gonna put that on our PBQ doc as long as, I don't know why, I'm gonna put it, I won't put it on the PBQ doc. I'll put it on as a sub bullet here on our homework doc here, just because there's that. All right, next one. Now we have mobile devices. What is one area in mobile devices that you need to review? All right, what is one thing that you need to review when it comes to mobile devices? And I'm going to give you a couple resources just to get started. So let me take a look at your responses. Cell phone, just a lot of it's this, and well, a lot of the multimedia stuff is going to be, I'm sorry, mobile device stuff is going to be based on stuff that industry wide you're going to probably be fine with. You're just going to want to see how it works together. And a lot of it's troubleshooting. So I just made this to help. This is mobile devices. Now, mobile devices is going to dip into anti-static. Well, not mobile device. That's in hardware anyways. That's RAM. These are a lot of hardware stuff. Airplane mode, knowing that. Troubleshooting why you're having an issue with Bluetooth on a mobile device. Also, networks for a mobile device. A signal is a topic, like questions like this, where which of the following features would allow a user to receive text messages? NFC, right? NFC is always a mobile device question. You need to know what near field communications is. You need to know all of the ways you can transmit data between mobile devices, VPN settings, mobile device usage, SSID. So I would definitely, that's the type of stuff you need to know with mobile devices, is NFC, all those, how mobile payments are configured, things like that are going to be helpful. So, all right. So what's more? Let's do one more before I don't see you for a few days. So next on our list is networking. Ooh, you guys. Oh, all right. Before we're gonna do networking. All right. But you also need to know your homework is to learn these areas. I would focus on RAID, virtualization, RAID configurations. Look up how they taught RAID in I would also RAID, you could definitely do flashcards on RAID and different configurations of RAID that were scenarios that would help you better understand RAID. Totally. Because there are different scenarios where RAID works and that is better or worse for backing up. And it's going to teach you the concepts of RAID so that you can explain them or use or identify the right answers in a PBQ. And that's what you want. You want to be able to explain or show what you know about something in a PBQ. So let's do networking real quick. You need like a flavor. Hopefully I can get you one for Soho Network. I just want to spurn you into, oh, this is good. This is good. Imagine making a document, making a flashcard that had only these questions, and I'll show them to you in a second, and did not have the answers until you wanted them. Just had the questions. Let me share my screen here. So here are some networking questions for you to practice with. You know, which of the following IP addresses is a valid IP4 address? Or you could ask yourself, what is a valid IP4 address? What does it look like? Why is it that one? Make your flashcard be, okay, why is this a valid address? Because it's like this. Which of the following will most likely be assigned as a default gateway on a client? A user can access local network resources but cannot access the internet. Which of the following is most likely misconfigured? Which device is responsible for forwarding traffic between two different networks? This one's on everything we've been doing lately. Which wireless encryption protocol provides the highest level of security? We just talked about that one, right? What does a subnet mask indicate? Which of the following ports is used for secure web traffic? A technician is setting up a Soho wireless router and wants to ensure the strongest security. Which of the following should be enabled? Which of the following tools is used to test the connectivity between two devices? A user wants to connect their smart TV without using a cable. Which device should be used? So I'll put this also on the doc so that you have it, but start to work on questions that are going to help you do well on multi-step PBQ type questions. All right. Where when you get a scenario, you're going to be able to answer it because what you need to be ready for that. So I'm just getting the link for you before I flip off this. And also just really start to review different, where did I put the document now? You need to start reviewing you need to get in deep with your PBQ content areas, domains, core one questions. I think we're probably going to spend 20 minutes developing a pretty specific, even if it's a little bit of a narrative, how you're going to study. Because I need to drill that into your head a little bit because I want you to have a vision for it. I want you to have your vision for what you need to improve. So I see people talking. That's good. All right. So my goal tonight was to introduce PBQ concepts, have you self-assess yourself a little bit, practice core one questions, of course, understand the depth of PBQs, understand the topics related to PBQs, give you a few resources, but also start to give you the ideas for developing that long-term study plan. Now, you're going to basically be on your own now with longer term study plans. I'll probably hold something free online if people want to join, maybe on Tuesday nights or so, and I'll put that out in the last class. I'll schedule it. If people want to come, that's fine. I'll be doing a lot of go through questions and stuff if that helps people. Probably a mix of core one and core two and PBQs. And I'll probably make some digital flashcards just to have some long-term repetition. But you have to really start committing to the longer windows of self-study. So I want you to be as efficient as possible. That's why I'm talking to you about the study, the cards and things like that. All right. I want you to be as efficient as possible with the things that you need to do. Expect to hear from Carla on the test date. I met with Carla. I talked to her about what we talked about. She should be messaging soon. Have a very good night. Keep moving forward. Start prioritizing your study on your own so that you start to not rely on the class structure so much and you start really realizing and making sure, all right, if I want to keep moving forward, I have to do that. And that's really where you need to be. All right. See you all on Thursday. Have a good night. Start getting some good rest, but be consistent with your study. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, sir.